There are times when nothing goes as planned and you feel like you're stuck in a dead end. The main character of this story was immersed in such thoughts. A beautiful girl with long wavy hair the color of the night sky and large lilac eyes. She felt hopeless and didn't know what to do next. She thought that this was the reason she had given up. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice. He asked her if she regretted it. Looking up, she saw a young man standing in front of her. He was a tall, thin guy with silver hair and eyes of different colors. The right one was red, and the left one was blue. The girl looked at him in surprise and called him Darcy. Leaning toward the girl, Darcy addressed her by the name Marceau and said that if she stayed, he would be by her side. But if she decided to run away, he would follow her to the ends of the earth. Kneeling in front of the girl, the young man pointed out that she herself had said that he could do so. Reaching out his hand to Marceau, Darcy smiled gently and told the girl that he simply wished her happiness. Impressed, Marceau looked cautiously at the boy's hand, then hesitantly began to reach out to him. Images of 3 people appeared in her mind. A girl with light brown hair and green eyes, hiding in the arms of a young man, and a blonde with blue eyes. He looked at Marceau with contempt, and behind them stood another guy in military uniform, who also looked at the girl with disdain. Shaking her head and banishing the unpleasant image from her mind, Marceau thought to herself that Darcy was right. She had nothing to worry about anymore. Placing her hand in Darcy's large palm, the girl replied that she did not regret her decision. And with a happy smile, she looked at the boy. Marceau noted to herself that she now understood that the person who needed her care the most was herself. The next moment, returning to reality, Marceau bowed her head in a curtsy and apologized to Lady Lejeune. She said that it was all her fault and that she had no excuse. Lady Lejeune was surprised and hurried to assure Marceau that everything was fine and that she shouldn't worry so much. Lady Lejeune turned out to be the girl from Marceau's memories, the young lady with light brown hair and green eyes. Lejeune was very happy and said that she was glad that Marceau had finally opened up to her. She suggested that they become friends. Looking up, Marceau smiled stiffly in response to the offer. She felt a little uncomfortable, but she thanked Lady Lejeune for her kindness. She thought to herself that the first thing she had to do after her rebirth as Marceau Étoile was to apologize. A little later, an elegant white carriage drawn by white horses drove through the streets of the capital from the palace. Children were playing on one of the city streets, singing a funny song. The song was about how Lejuang was the favorite, and Marceau was jealous of her. It said that Marceau was a villain who was angry because she did not receive the prince's affection. Since the children were singing loudly, the song could be heard clearly in the passing carriage. Hearing the words of the song, Lady Marceau's maid turned pale and told her mistress that they should teach these children a lesson. But Marceau just smiled and asked her maid not to worry about it. The girl thought to herself that these songs didn't matter, because Lady Marceau no longer existed. Then she began to wonder if the next incident would happen at the ball. That Lezuan would shoot an arrow on the terrace. Therefore, she had to stop this and win the trust of those around her. The girl also noted to herself that she did not know how the story would unfold, especially since she had only just taken the first step, by asking for forgiveness. Looking out of the carriage window at the city, Marceau thought about how she could prove to those around her that she had changed. In that case, she would be able to change the plot of this confusing and tragic story. When the day of the ball arrived, Marceau ran to the terrace where the prince and Lady Lezuan were standing. The girl excitedly began to say that Lezuan should not be there. Marceau's actions confused everyone even more. She grabbed Lady Lezuan by the arm and tried to pull her off the terrace, begging her to leave with her. Even the prince himself did not understand what was happening and asked Marceau what she was talking about. After several minutes of unsuccessful persuasion, an arrow pierced Marceau's arm, and blood splattered the terrace. The girl sank to the floor. Trembling with pain, she clutched her wound, and Marceau rejoiced in her mind, because she had managed to save Lejeune after all. But something was wrong. A chill ran down the girl's spine, and she turned with horror to the hall from which the terrace led. All the guests looked at her with undisguised contempt and disdain, and the ballroom was filled with whispers. Marceau was shocked. She did not understand why everyone was reacting this way, because after all, she was the one who had been injured while saving Lady Lezuan. As it turned out later, after the ball, Rumors spread that Lady Marceau had tactlessly burst onto the terrace when the prince and Lady Lezuan had decided to be alone there. People even found it funny because the girl was injured while trying to take Lady Lezuan's place. All because Lady Marceau was so obsessed with Prince Ryan that it was sad. There was also gossip that perhaps Marceau herself had hired the assassin to stage the scene and be the center of attention. This is what Lady Marceau heard from the other ladies as they sat in a local cafe, not even noticing her presence at the next table. Such gossip upset the girl even more, because she had tried so many times but to no avail. When she helped Lezuan take off her coat, people suspected her of being jealous of the girl's outfit. If she paid Lezuan any compliment, people would whisper to the lady that Marceau was actually making a snide remark about her outdated clothes, or that they were out of fashion. Marceau herself understood perfectly well that this world revolved around the main character, Lady Lezuan. Although Lezuan treated her well, her beloved Prince Ryan and the commander of the Knights, Kaisen, were secretly in love with Lezuan, and everyone else in this fantasy world hated her Lady Marceau. Therefore, no matter how hard she tried, in the end, she would still be guilty, and everyone else in this fantasy world hates her Lady Marceau. So no matter how hard she tries in the end, she will still be blamed. Thinking about all this, Marceau noted to herself that she was very tired of constantly trying to change something. One day, while in the palace, Lady Lezuan approached Marceau and suggested they take a walk together. The girls went out into the palace garden. Lezuan said that she was very concerned that Lady Marceau had been looking very tired lately. That's why she suggested a walk, because it's nice to go out into the garden and breathe some fresh air. Marceau thanked her for her concern, but to herself, the girl noted that she really just wanted to rest in her room. In the end, however, she accepted Lejeune's invitation and followed her for a walk in the courtyard. But while Marceau was lost in her thoughts and looking at the palace, she did not notice how Lezuan climbed onto one of the large boulders that surrounded the pond in the garden and reached for a flower that was sticking out of the water. Marceau thought about how she wanted to believe that she still had hope to fix everything. Then she turned around and saw that Lejeune had leaned too far over the pond and was starting to slip into the water. The girl screamed at Lady Lejeune to warn her, but it was too late. Lejeune fell from the boulder into the pond, and Mars, without thinking, jumped after her into the water. Lady Marceau's cries were heard by the commander of the Knights, Kaisen, who rushed across the garden to help at the pond. Marceau had just climbed out of the pond and pulled Lezuan out. Kaisen rushed to Lezuan and asked if she was all right. The girl replied that she was fine, that Lady Marceau had helped her. After that, the wet Lezuan began to cough violently, trying to get rid of the water she had swallowed. While Marceau was trying to catch her breath and wipe the water from her face, Kaisen gritted his teeth and whispered that it was happening again. Then he turned abruptly to the girl and shouted angrily at her, "It's Marceau again!" After the incident, Kaisen grabbed Marceau by the arm and dragged her through the palace corridors. The girl screamed to be let go, saying she hadn't done anything. But the commander of the Knights only emphasized that it was the prince's order. No one listened to the girl. She wasn't even given a towel and was brought to the prince completely wet. Kaisen reported that they would closely monitor Lady Lezuan's condition. He also said that Lezuan had told him that Lady Marceau had hugged her before she fell. Ryan said that this worried him greatly, as Lady Lezuan had a very soft heart and should not have been looking after this girl. Approaching Marceau, the prince looked her in the eyes and asked in a threatening voice if she thought she would have a chance if Lady Lejeune suddenly disappeared. He added that Lady Marceau was simply a despicable person. The girl was hurt by these words and despair enveloped her heart. Why didn't anyone believe her? Ryan kept saying that he had been too lenient with the girl because of her Marquis family background, but she had dared to harm his beloved. The prince glanced at the girl and remarked that if a woman was deprived of love, there must be a reason for it. Marceau had nothing to say in response. She kept thinking, why doesn't anyone believe her? And why does nothing ever change? Why does the same thing always happen? These questions echoed in her head countless times, and she tried to do everything possible to change her fate. Not waiting for any apologies or explanations from Marceau, the prince said that he had warned her many times, but now his generosity had come to an end. The girl decided that if nothing changed, no matter what she did, she would just forget about everything. Suddenly, Marceau replied to the prince that she understood everything. Ryan looked at the girl in surprise, not understanding what she meant. She explained that from now on, she would do nothing at all. She would not even go near Lady Lezuan, would stay as far away from all events as possible, lock herself in her room, and repent for all her sins until the end of her life. After that, Marceau turned around and ran out into the corridor, slamming the door behind her. As she ran through the palace corridors, she thought about how strange it was. She had tried so hard, but still couldn't achieve her goals. And as a result, after all her efforts, she gave up the life she once cherished so much. At that moment, Prince Ryan and Lady Lezuan, accompanied by Commander Kyson, entered the ballroom where a small event was taking place. The ladies of the court began to whisper that it was very strange that the Marquis's daughter was not attending the public celebrations. And how could this have happened, since she was their only daughter? Hearing such talk, Ryan was dissatisfied, but he already knew that Marceau had always been self-centered. Marceau, now just as wet, ran through the corridors to the palace exit. She understood that by doing so, people would think she was a coward, but for some reason she didn't care and felt something completely different. Once on the street, Marceau headed for her carriage. There, her maid was waiting for her, very worried when she saw her mistress completely wet, and asked if she was all right. The girl thanked the maid for waiting for her and said that they were going back to the estate. The maid became even more worried. She quickly brought a towel and asked her young mistress what had happened and why she was soaking wet. Marceau replied that everything was fine now and there was no need to worry. The girl explained to the maid that she was so angry at the prince for accusing her of saying that she would return home and stay there. The maid was shocked. She asked her mistress how she was going to do that. Marceau didn't understand what she meant. The girl knew very well that she was the daughter of a well-known, wealthy, and noble family. So she made up her mind and replied to the maid that she would simply squander her money and deny herself nothing. Once home and changed, Marceau flopped down on the bed in her room and sighed with relief. Without leaving the bed, the girl asked the maid to bring her 10 macaroons with black tea and a piece of strawberry cake. The maid took the order and asked her to wait a minute. Mars decided that it was all over. Now she didn't care what happened in the story. She was going to live happily ever after with her cat. A few minutes later, the maid brought everything the young lady had ordered and set the table for tea. Marceau thanked her. Sitting in an armchair and enjoying the aroma of tea, the girl mentally said goodbye to Ryan, who never listened to her, and to the annoying Lezuan, who was unable to read the atmosphere. She also wondered why she hadn't thought of this before. Probably because she had simply become accustomed to the pressure of society in the modern world. Suddenly, her cheerful mood disappeared when Marceau thought about how she would now spend her free time. Unlike in the modern world, there wasn't much to do here. She needed something to help her survive this isolation. For example, a computer or a phone. And then it hit her like a bolt of lightning. A brilliant idea came to her head on how to get out of this situation. She turned to her maid, named Letty. She came over to listen to her young mistress. Mars smiled at her and said she wanted to meet a merchant of enchanted items. The girl thought to herself that this was just what she needed. In this world, she could make new enchanted items. The girl knew that these items were created by processing arcane stones. For example, you could create horseless carriages or dictaphones. And that was just the beginning. If you gave the arcane stones to sorcerers, they would refine them according to your specifications. However, this technology is not very well developed, mainly because arcanum is very expensive, and the quality of the devices depends largely on the abilities of the wizard. In addition, wizards do not particularly like enchanted objects. They dislike the fact that these devices allow people to use magic without their presence. Moreover, people already consider sorcerers dangerous because of the power they possess. The emperor and the nobles alike condemned enchanted objects and spread misinformation about them. For example, that a crew without horses cannot be trusted, that enchanted objects are cursed and therefore should not be used. Mars lay on the sofa and thought everything through carefully. She thought it was nonsense to believe that a voice recorder could be used to cast a curse, but if she did start investing in enchanted objects, it would bring her a fortune. The girl knew that very soon Lezuan and Ryan would use the enchanted carriage on one of their dates, and the reputation of enchanted objects would skyrocket. According to the original story, the imperial family, ruled by sorcerers, made a ton of money from making enchanted items. They also became known for using them to suppress sorcerers. Eventually, high-ranking sorcerers succumbed to the temptation of great wealth and began to create more enchanted objects. After doing some quick calculations, Marceau realized that she was wealthy enough to prepare for this in advance. Moreover, the noble family of Etual owns 2 of the 5 existing Arcanum mines. The Imperial family owns 2 more, and the last one belongs to the Ethical family, from which Lady Lezoine comes. And since Marceau had both Arcanum and a large capital, and if she was going to sit at home, she might as well earn a little extra. Besides, life without enchanted items was simply boring. A little later, Marceau sat in her room waiting for the merchant. She couldn't take her eyes off the clock and even began to think that she had been deceived. Letty told her that she had already found the merchant, so the girl was eagerly awaiting his arrival. They were supposed to meet him at 2 o'clock. Now it was 2 minutes to 2, but the merchant had not yet appeared at the main entrance of the mansion. Marceau thought it would be easy, given the power of the Etual family, but it seemed she was wrong. If so, then she would have to wait a little longer to add some fun and entertainment to her home life. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a gust of wind blew and a bright light flashed. And right on the table in front of Marceau, a man appeared. The girl raised her bewildered eyes and thought to herself that this man had appeared out of nowhere. The stranger was dressed in a hooded cloak. He smiled and greeted the young hostess informally. As the man descended from the table, Marceau speculated that he might have teleported directly to the estate. If so, such movements would require considerable skill. The girl also noticed that the stranger was behaving informally, and since she was a former girl from Korea, she couldn't just accept such behavior. But just as Marceau was about to say something to the man, he stood in front of her and took off his hood. The girl's eyes widened and shock froze on her face. It was not an old man or an older man, as she had thought, but a young guy. Tall, fit, with silver hair that glistened in the sun. He had thick silver eyelashes that framed his deep blue eyes. He was handsome with a straight nose and soft features. The guy smiled at Marceau and introduced himself as not only a merchant, but also a magician, and his name was Darcy. Stunned, Marceau sat silently and stared at the guy. She couldn't believe that such a man existed in this world. A man who was much more attractive than Ryan, the main character of this story. Thoughts flashed through the girl's mind that this guy was like a beautiful flower hiding behind a seductive facade, capable of killing his victim with his poison at any moment. Still, she couldn't help herself but continue to be drawn to this flower. Marceau also wondered how someone like him could not appear in the plot. Then she muttered aloud, "Is he really just a merchant? He's too handsome to be an ordinary extra." Hearing the young lady's muttering, Darcy replied that he was indeed a merchant and asked what an extra was. Marceau recovered from her thoughts and hastened to explain to her guest that it was nothing special and called him master. And then she immediately realized her mistake. Since the young man had caught her off guard, she had forgotten herself and inadvertently called him master, even though she was a marquise and held a higher position. Then, when Darcy sat down on the sofa on the other side of the table, Marceau turned to him and asked if he knew who she was. With a dissatisfied expression on his face, Darcy replied that she was the only daughter of the Marquis d'Etoile, Marceau d'Etoile. Upon receiving his answer, Marceau realized that the young man had behaved so informally not because he was unaware of her position. Realizing that the girl did not understand, Darcy explained that he could not stand talking to nobles formally, so he asked for her understanding. Mars noted to herself that informal speech suited the young man better. Darcy added that he did not understand why people were so obsessed with social status when they were all the same. Marceau was surprised by the young man's words. After all, it was unacceptable to say such things about the nobility in this world. She had not met anyone with such modern views in a long time. Although the girl was indeed the Marquise's only daughter, she also disliked the class division in society. The lady allowed her guest to speak informally. Darcy smiled and thanked her. Marceau noted to herself that they had found something unusual in the ordinary. Then the girl asked how the young man had ended up here. Darcy replied that he had used an enchanted item he had made himself. He looked at the ring on his finger and explained that it allowed him to teleport, that he had recently created it and was just about to try it out. Marceau was impressed. She knew that teleportation required a lot of time and effort to draw complex runes, but it seemed to her that the boy had done it without much effort. The girl was convinced that her intuition had not failed her. This man was truly talented, and she had expected an ordinary merchant. The young lady then asked if the boy could really make enchanted items himself. Darcy confirmed that he could, and that he also sold them. Marceau then gathered her courage and said that there was a device she wanted to order, and that she was willing to provide him with arcanum stones. With a more serious expression, Darcy asked how much it would cost. Marceau calmly replied that it would be 5 billion gold coins. The young man was intrigued. He agreed to the offer and asked what the aristocrat, the only daughter of the Marquis of Etoile, could possibly want. Marceau understood why the boy was interested in her intentions, because in a world where magic was condemned, it was amazing to see a noble lady seeking him out. But the girl didn't care, because it was all for the sake of her successful and happy life outside this society. Then Marceau handed Darcy the papers with sketches and drawings, and announced that she wanted a device that would record and play back videos. The girl planned that her first project, which would mark the beginning of her secluded life in this world, would be a movie theater. Holding the drawings in her hands, the young lady unfolded a few more and told the boy that this was only the beginning and that she had several more ideas. A little later, night fell on the street. It was a dark and eerie place, and the only sound was the footsteps of soldiers. Guards were stationed at every entrance and exit. It was here that Darcy had been locked up for 10 long years. Those who had imprisoned him felt guilty, and to ease their guilt, they allowed the boy to go out for walks. It was a ridiculous gesture, but thanks to it, Darcy was able to find out that the daughter of Euthalia was looking for a dealer in enchanted objects. The boy laughed to himself at how the guards stood on guard, determined not to let him escape. It was funny because they didn't even notice when he was actually nowhere near. Nowhere near this old, neglected, and dilapidated palace that served as the boy's prison. And only this small space was a place he could truly call his own. Once in his room, Darcy thought about how Marcia Etoile was a little different from what he had heard about her. He was even prepared to use threats to get what he wanted, but he did not expect that the noble lady would actually be interested in creating enchanted devices. Moreover, who knew that the reason for this would be to create comfortable living conditions for her at home under lock and key? Darcy took off his cloak and threw it on the floor. Then he tossed a red ball onto his clothes, which began to hiss, crackle, and then ignite along with the cloak. Watching the clothes burn, Darcy thought it was ironic, since he was locked up and wanted to be free. While the cloak was burning, Darcy took a bath and thought about how this situation was fueling his interest even more. He had obtained some arcanum, so he had already achieved what he wanted from the deal. But he still needed to conduct additional experiments. Rising from the water, the boy thought that it was time to take it out right now. He then carefully removed the lens from one eye. Darcy looked at his reflection in the mirror and at his eyes, which were now different colors. He smiled and noted to himself that he could scare people who trembled at the mere sight of his eyes by using his charm. And that was very useful to him. After his bath, the boy sat down on the couch and grabbed the drawings Lady Marceau had given him. Then there was a knock at the door. Darcy gave permission to enter the room, took the mouthpiece and a round red stone in his hands, and used the stone to light the tobacco in the pipe. A soldier entered the room and remarked to himself that the room was once again filled with the smell of burning herbs. The man said that he had noticed that the young man had taken a longer bath than usual, addressing him as "Your Highness." Darcy replied that when you are being watched, you feel as if you cannot breathe. That is why he needed to let off some steam alone, and asked the soldier if he understood what he meant. After all, the soldier was also a man, and should understand him. The soldier blushed. Darcy said that if the soldier understood him and had nothing more to say, he could leave. The red-faced man hurried to salute His Highness, apologized, and left. Left alone, Darcy began to think that although the short-distance teleportation had been successful, he could not move far enough to reach another country. Then the boy looked at the drawings and sketches of Mara's recording device. Darcy thought it was a simpler and more innovative solution than he had expected. He smiled happily and eagerly immersed himself in studying the drawings of the new device. The next morning, Letty came to her young mistress's chambers and reported that she had vacated the neighboring room and brought several heavy curtains, as the lady had requested. Mars thanked the maid. The girl herself was delighted that she'd managed to sign a contract with the merchant for the manufacture of the enchanted device. But she thought the young man was rather eccentric, since he agreed to do it on the condition that all their meetings would be held alone. And if anyone else found out about their contract, he would immediately terminate it. But Marceau understood that Darcy was capable of quickly getting down to work. And for that, you had to be a genius. Besides, her drawings were not very professional, so she would have to trust him for now, especially since she had given him all the arcane knowledge he needed. Thinking about this, Marceau suddenly jumped up and said that she still needed to tell the acting troupe everything. She noted that they would not be able to edit the footage, so they would not be able to make films, but they would be able to record plays and operas to watch later. To do this, the young lady needed to buy out the troupe, but people would surely start gossiping about it again, and she didn't want to have to worry about every step she took. Then Marceau turned to Letty again. She was a pretty girl with chestnut hair and eyes that had a mysterious, melancholic look. The young lady said to gather the troupe and all the opera staff together. Letty was very surprised. How could that be? Marceau confirmed and asked her to gather everyone in the garden. With a heavy sigh, the maid agreed with her mistress. Marceau understood that Letty had been working harder and harder lately, and still did everything she asked of her. Then Marceau wondered if she should order a new script. It would be nice if it was something like a drama. Letty asked the lady in surprise what she was talking about. A little later, a letter from Lady Lezoine was brought to the young mistress. The girl was not thrilled. Lady Lezoine wrote that she missed Marceau. This was not good for Marceau. After all, whether she invited Lezoine or not, the gossip would spread anyway. The girl also understood that Lejeune simply did not think about the consequences of her actions, that she was genuinely concerned that they had not seen each other for a very long time. But she and Lejeune had never been close enough to invite each other over. Moreover, Marceau had not invited Lejeune to her home once in the past year. This was mainly because of the lewd looks the main characters gave her. And also because the time spent with Lejuang was not the most pleasant. Whenever they met, people compared the girls and belittled Marceau. Of course, Lejuang did not notice this, because when you are loved for who you are, you do not need to be attentive to your surroundings. Marceau knew that Lejuang was not a bad person, but no matter how hard she tried to choose the right clothes and follow etiquette, she always remained in Lady Lejuang's shadow. Every time, Marceau asked herself, what did I do wrong this time? What was wrong with her? This greatly depressed the former Marceau. But now, with her long, slender legs thrown up on the table, the current Marceau thought that it no longer mattered. The girl said that now that she had given up, she felt free. Nevertheless, Marceau thought that they needed to meet and settle everything once and for all. But if they met alone, there was a very high probability that everything would go wrong. Therefore, the girl wrote a reply to Lady Lezuan, asking for a meeting not only with her, but also with the main characters. A few days later, Marceau arrived at the greenhouse, which served as a meeting place and tea room. The girl thought about how she still hadn't had time to meet the corpse. She had been busy arranging a schedule of meetings with the three main characters. Lejeune had no idea how attentive the girl was trying to be to her. Marceau believed that this would most likely be just another day in the life of the main character. But that didn't matter anymore. She didn't want to dwell on it. Marceau was in a good mood and full of anticipation. After all, today she was supposed to meet with Darcy to discuss the enchanted devices the girl had prepared thoroughly. She wrote a check for 5 billion gold coins and prepared tea and sweets for both of them. They met at exactly 2 o'clock. As soon as the clock struck 2, there was a flash of light and Darcy appeared. Landing and looking around, the boy was clearly dissatisfied and looked annoyed. Marceau was even frightened by the look on his face. She thought he was angry. But the next moment, Darcy plopped down on the couch and greeted Marceau with a beaming smile. He also mentioned that he was a little late getting there. The girl thought to herself that for a moment, the guy seemed very scary to her. She was sure that if they had met somewhere else, his mood would have been even worse. Pulling herself together, Marceau noted that 2 weeks had already passed and asked how their project was progressing. Darcy said that before answering, he wanted to ask the girl something. Why did she need this? Because he had the impression that she was no longer going to leave the estate. Marceau replied frankly that she had no intention of leaving. She thought to herself that there was no point in hiding it. Rumors would spread anyway because she was staying at home. Sooner or later, people would find out, so she might as well share it with Darcy. The young man was stunned by her answer. He asked the lady why she had made such a decision. The girl couldn't explain right away. She kept thinking about how to tell him without actually saying it. She had to take care of all the potential problems, because she believed that merchants were among those who easily spread rumors. Unable to think of anything better, Marceau said that the boy should know that many noble families have their own problems. Something was also happening in the Etual family. Therefore, she decided to obey her father's will and, as she said this, Marceau began to stammer because she saw Darcy's expression change. He was clearly dissatisfied with her answer, his eyes flashing with anger. A terrible feeling came over Marceau, and she couldn't explain anything else. Darcy sat silently, staring intently into the girl's eyes with his blue eyes. Marceau was surprised and frightened at the same time. She didn't understand why he had changed so much and wasn't responding to what she was saying. It seemed as if he was waiting for her to tell him the truth. It was a familiar and unpleasant feeling, the same one she had felt when she met Ryan. Clenching her fists, the girl pulled herself together. She thought that maybe she should take a risk and open up to Darcy a little. Plucking up her courage, Marceau said that she was tired of people. She was very tired of everything. Darcy's head was filled with thoughts that he was tired of being locked up in that forgotten place. He wanted to leave the country instead of seeking revenge. The boy was going to do it to break out of this vicious circle. However, Darcy asked the girl what she meant by tired. Marceau explained that she didn't want to see anyone anymore. She was going to rot in her room forever. She believed that in this case, she would be happier than anyone else. The young man was shocked. He couldn't believe that anyone would choose such a way of life. Then Darcy asked if the girl even understood what it meant to be locked up. Marceau looked at the boy in surprise and replied that of course she understood. Then Darcy repeated that the only daughter of the Marquis d'Etoile had decided to shut herself away at home. The girl nodded decisively. Then she changed the subject and asked the merchant where the device was. But Darcy's thoughts were elsewhere. At first, he thought that the Marquise's daughter simply had peculiar tastes. But after she said she was tired of people, he became curious about what had made her look so sad and disconsolate. Perhaps the matter was being handled too hastily? Since Darcy remained silent, Marceau assumed that the matter was probably progressing slowly due to the tight deadline. If that was the case, the young man could tell her so. But the merchant replied that that was not the case. He suggested making changes to their contract. He was curious to learn more about this self-isolation. So Darcy asked the girl to show him how she planned to do it. Marceau was surprised and asked why he was interested. The guy explained that he had also spent a lot of time alone. The girl pointed out that he was a merchant, and Darcy remarked that he wasn't the most popular one. Marceau was puzzled. Darcy took out a bag and, putting his hand inside, said that he had finished everything she had asked him to do. He also noted that he was quite good at his job. Then the boy approached Marceau and asked for her hand. The girl held out her palms and Darcy placed something he had taken from his bag into them. Lowering her eyes, Marceau saw a real camera. It was the same one she had drawn in her sketches, almost identical to the ones in her modern world. Marceau was amazed that Darcy had been able to create this object in such a short time. The girl realized that she wanted to continue working with this guy. Seeing the stunned expression on the girl's face, Darcy emphasized that it was very difficult to find such an experienced magician as he was. Marceau agreed with the boy and said that she would show him what she had planned. After that, the young mistress led her guest to the mansion and headed for one of the rooms. On the way, Darcy thought that soon he would leave the palace and the emperor who was using him. If he were presented to society as a prince, he could live like a second prince. But the boy did not want to waste his precious time on such a life. If he could survive his birthday this year, nothing would hold him back. Then Darcy planned to go far, far away and live the life he wanted, and atone for the sins he had committed. Until then, he would pass the time studying the girl who wanted the exact opposite. Walking through the corridors of the mansion, Darcy also noted to himself how large and luxurious the Etual mansion was. He even wondered how much they had to pay for all this. Finally reaching the right room, Marceau opened the door and announced that it was the theater room. Upon entering, Darcy saw an almost empty room. There was nothing special about it. Just a regular bed against the wall, a sofa in the middle, and a bookcase on the opposite side of the room. Marceau seemed to read the boy's thoughts and said that there was nothing special here. Disappointed, Darcy added that the room was quite empty. Looking around the room, the boy couldn't figure out what to do. Marceau said that now they had a magical device. Then she went to the table, put the camera on it, and turned it on. After the girl pressed the button, a beam of light illuminated one wall of the room. A rectangular screen appeared on the wall. Marceau was amazed. She was very happy and said that the device was working and now she had a real screen. Darcy didn't see anything interesting in this and noted that it was easier than easy to do. Then the boy asked what she planned to do in this room alone. Marceau calmly replied that she usually lay there and listened to music. Darcy didn't understand what she meant, so the girl explained that she was going to record plays using this device and watch them there. Then she would read a book and have a snack. The salesman was shocked by these plans. He asked Marceau again if she really intended to stay in her room to do this. The girl nodded in agreement. Then Darcy asked why she didn't just go out for a walk. The girl replied that she liked being alone. The boy was shocked. An indescribable disappointment appeared on his face. He had expected something more. Looking at Darcy's expression, Marceau said that she didn't expect him to understand immediately. So she asked him to show her something else. The girl ran to the window and grabbed the curtain. Then she asked the guy to lie down on the couch. Without any expectations, Darcy agreed and flopped down on the sofa while Marceau closed the curtains tightly. The boy kept wondering what this could change. He knew very well what it was like to be alone, and it made him feel sick. Then Marceau grabbed the thicker curtains and closed them again so that no light could enter the room. She said that her favorite time of day was from midnight to dawn, especially closer to dawn. Then the girl went to the gramophone and turned it on. Beautiful music began to fill the dark room. Darcy noted to himself that he felt so calm. The harmony was so soothing that he even closed his eyes. Marceau asked him how he liked it. It was wonderful, wasn't it? Then the girl lay down on the bed herself and said that now they could just lie on the bed and listen to music. Hearing this, Darcy jumped up and asked if that was all. Getting up from the sofa, the boy noted with disappointment that it was very different from what he had imagined. Marceau continued to lie on the bed listening to music. When Darcy came closer to her, the girl calmly said something. She said that sometimes she just wanted to spend time alone with herself, that this way she allowed herself to rest when she was exhausted. Mars opened her eyes and saw Darcy standing by the bed, staring intently at her. The girl felt uncomfortable and got up. Then the guy asked what was exhausting her so much. After all, she was the only daughter of Étoile. She had everything. Mars smiled at this and said that she was still human, that relationships never turn out the way she wants them to. That's why she sometimes needs to distract herself from it all. Darcy noticed that the girl was tired because she cared too much about what other people thought. So he advised her to just stop thinking about it. Marceau smiled in response and said that from now on she would try to fix it. Then Darcy went to the window. Opening the curtains, he asked the girl what item she wanted to buy next time. The lady happily replied that she needed a device that could enlarge the screen so that it covered the entire wall. The boy asked if she really meant the entire wall, and Marceau replied without hesitation that she wanted the entire wall to become a screen. Looking at the girl's happy and smiling face, Darcy thought to himself that her expression was different now. It was at that moment that her face changed so dramatically. The salesman took the order and said they would meet here in 2 weeks. Marceau asked if he was sure. Wouldn't it be difficult to create? The young man replied that he was sure he could do anything. Darcy noted to himself that the change in her expression had affected him. It affected him so much that he wanted to watch the girl a little longer. A few days later, Marceau stood near the main entrance to the Étoile family estate, accompanied by a couple of maids. The young mistress stood and sighed heavily. Unfortunately, it was time to welcome the unwelcome guests. Someone called the girl's name. She turned around, and the maids bowed their heads to greet the arriving guests. The cheerful Lady Lezuan appeared on the porch of the mansion, accompanied by Prince Ryan and Commander Kaisen. It should be noted that the boys did not look as happy as the girl. Lezuan thanked Marceau for the invitation and said that it had taken them some time to meet and get there. Marceau smiled and replied that everything was fine. She thanked the guests for coming and greeted them warmly. To herself, the girl thought that it was time to put an end to this terrible relationship. After the meeting, the young hostess led her guests to the greenhouse. When they sat down on the sofas, Lezuan said that she was very happy to see Marceau, as she had been very worried about the rumors that the lady had not left her house for some time. Marceau explained that it was because she was not feeling very well. Lezuan was concerned and asked if the girl was ill. Perhaps Lady Marceau was unwell even now. Against the backdrop of Lejeune's concern, Ryan and Kaisen looked like guard dogs waiting for an attack, ready to rush to Lejeune's defense at any moment. Marceau didn't answer right away. Looking at the tense expressions on the boys' faces, she paused for a moment. The girl knew that Lezuan was genuinely worried about her, because she was a kind-hearted heroine who got along with everyone. That was why Marceau thought they could become friends, and surely Lezuan wanted that too. However, things did not turn out the way she wanted. Putting down her cup with a serious expression on her face, Marceau said that she had gathered everyone there to inform them that she would no longer be seeing Lady Lezuan in the future. Confused, Lezuan asked why. Marceau explained that she realized she had made too many mistakes. She didn't understand that being around Lady Lezuan was wrong. So she would reflect on her actions while locked in her mansion, and then they wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. Surprised, Lejeune began to protest and ask what Lady Marceau had done wrong. She was not to blame for anything. Seeing Lejeune's reaction, Marceau noted to herself that nothing had changed. The girl wondered if Lezuan really hadn't seen how others constantly pressured Marceau because of her. Although that was impossible because Lezuan didn't just avoid conflicts or misunderstandings herself. She simply never had to get involved in these disputes. So in the end, everything always worked out for Lezuan. Avoiding such things was not a crime, but only Marceau suffered from such actions. So the girl decided to leave the scene. Then Marceau looked at Lezuan and asked the lady not to call her that anymore. At this, Kaisen exploded with anger. He began to shout, asking how the girl dared to give orders to Lady Lezuan. Marceau calmly replied that it was not an order, but that she was simply trying to keep her distance. She also assured them that they could be sure they would not see her at social events, as had been the case recently. Ryan stared intently at the girl. Lejeune looked worried, and Kaisen clenched his teeth and asked if Marceau really thought they would believe that so easily. But Marceau was more interested in why Ryan had gone so quiet. It was unusual, which made the girl wary. That's when Lejeune exploded in hysterics. With tears in her eyes, she jumped up from the sofa and, shouting that she really considered them friends, rushed out of the greenhouse. Kaisen ran after her. Marceau noted to herself that, as expected, the main character had gone after the main heroine. Then the girl met Ryan's gaze, who was still sitting in the same place, staring at her intently. Left alone, the prince finally asked if she was serious. Marceau replied that she was. Hearing her answer, Ryan irritably pointed out that people don't change so easily. Marceau then reminded the prince that she had already told him she would stay home after he himself said that she wasn't allowed to do anything anyway. The girl noted that most of the difficulties Lezuan had to face were caused by the former Marceau. Therefore, if you twist the plot, Ryan will end up spending more time with Lezuan. This made Marceau wonder if Ryan would be able to avoid conflict with Lezuan despite his difficult character. The girl then said that she hoped that His Highness was suffering as much as she was. After that, she bowed to the prince and said goodbye. Several days passed after the meeting. Marceau was sitting in her room, and Letty was helping her get ready. While the maid was combing the young lady's hair, the girl thought about how it was finally over. And that cheered her up a lot. She believed that the simpler life was, the better. After her hair was done, Letty also helped her put on a luxurious outfit and pick out matching jewelry. The only daughter of the Etchell family was dressed in a beautiful red dress with open shoulders, adorned with gold and red precious stones. This is how Marceau was preparing for the long-awaited meeting with the actors, which was to take place today. When she finished getting ready, Letty remarked that her mistress looked simply stunning. Marceau smiled and thanked her for the compliment. Rising from her chair, the lady threw on a shawl and told the maid that she thought they had a mole in the house. Letty asked in surprise if there really was a mole in the mansion. Marceau replied that it was, because Ryan had reacted too quickly to her actions, which was a little suspicious. So the young lady asked Letty to look into it. The maid replied that she would do everything. Then Marceau took the camera lying on the couch and went to meet the actors. A large number of actors had gathered in the mansion's large hall. They were all impressed by the mansion's lavish decor and whispered among themselves. Then the door opened and the young mistress of the mansion, Ethel, entered the hall accompanied by a maid. The girl smiled and greeted everyone warmly. She also thanked them for coming. One man was struck by the girl's beauty. He hurried to introduce himself. Bowing to the lady, the man said that his name was Peetle, that he was a playwright who had written the script, and that he was also very pleased to meet Lady Marceau. Marceau also noted that she had heard many good things about him, and believed that he had the potential to write good scripts for dramas. Peetle was embarrassed. and replied that it was nothing special. Then the girl turned her gaze to the other actors who had gathered at the estate that day, looking at the young men and women, some of whom had already taken to the stage. Marceau was sure that the rumors had reached them. The fact that they had come anyway meant that they either didn't care about them or simply needed the money. After all, she was offering 10 times the market rate, so working for the villainous Marceau Etual was worth it. Looking at the young mistress of the estate, one of the actors whispered to his colleague that he had come here for the money, but he was curious about the catch. In the young man's eyes, Marceau really did look like a scary villain. He was worried that she would make them do something strange. He felt uneasy when the young lady took a seat on the couch in the front row and stared intently at them. The young man thought that you can never be sure that everything will be all right. And when the scary lady raised a strange device, pointed it at them and clicked something, the boy and his friend were seriously frightened. With a calm and friendly expression, Marceau explained to the actors that she had gathered everyone there that day to tell them that she would be recording the plays. The actors looked at the lady in confusion and asked her what she meant by recording. Another actor approached Marceau and asked her again what she meant by recording. It was Ledro, the main character in the play and also the most popular actor among the young ladies. He was a tall guy with pleasant features, light brown hair, and bright orange eyes. However, looking at this young and handsome actor, Marceau thought to herself that Darcy had set her standards for male beauty too high. After that, the girl even blushed a little. Then Ledro brought the lady back to reality and asked her to explain what she meant by record. Showing the boy the camera, Marceau said that she was going to keep the plays inside this enchanted device as a souvenir. Then she said it would be easier if she just showed them. And then, with a happy smile, she announced that she was starting to record. Ledro was the first to appear in front of the camera. He asked the lady where exactly he should look. Several more actors appeared in the background, looking cautiously at the camera. Marceau suggested that they come closer and say something to the camera. The guys greeted her uncertainly. Then they left the stage and sat down on chairs behind Lady Marceau, who was turning around the camera, trying to position it correctly. The girl heard the actors talking about how they didn't quite understand what was going on. But she wasn't bothered by that. On the contrary, she was confident that everything would work out, and that inspired her greatly. Then Marceau asked for the curtain on the stage to be opened and pointed the camera at the white screen. She then asked everyone present to look at the screen and turned on the camera. The actors were completely taken aback. They were simply stunned. The guys sitting behind Marceau's back were speechless when they saw Ledro and themselves in the background on the screen. Lady Marceau explained that this would allow them to make recordings and watch them later. Then she clarified that it was an enchanted device that she had developed herself, so there was no need to be afraid of it. And if they doubted the devices, it would be taken as doubt in her. Marceau noted that she had to clarify this point from the very beginning, as enchanted objects had a bad reputation, but so far, only she understood that it was more of a blessing than a curse. After all, it was a device that could remind them of the past. For a few minutes, the actors stood silently and watched the recording on the screen. They looked at themselves as they appeared one by one in the video. Suddenly, the actors in the video laughed. They began to lively discuss how awkward they had behaved and how they had looked like logs. Ledro was also impressed by his recording. Everyone was amazed at how they looked on the screen and how it worked. One of the actors noted that it didn't seem so bad to him. Hearing such positive feedback and enthusiasm from the actors, Marceau asked if everyone agreed to continue filming. But after the lady's question, all the actors' enthusiasm disappeared and silence fell in the room. A little later, Petal ran up to Marceau. The playwright wanted to clarify something with the lady before they started the play. The girl was ready to answer any questions. Petal said that the story they had prepared was called The Love Story of a Girl and a Wizard. But, as the lady herself knew, wizards did not have a very good reputation. Marceau thought about the playwright's words. Looking at her, Petal asked if the lady would mind if they continued. But the girl's thoughts were about magicians. People who were born with magical abilities and who deserve a lot for their talent. But greed for great honor and power prevailed. They wanted to climb higher and higher to the top. But this only led to a struggle for power within the imperial family. The dynasty that was in power at the time spread malicious and evil rumors about the magicians in order to isolate and control them. As a result, several magicians agreed to serve the imperial family, while others went into hiding and became difficult to find. Rebellions against the imperial palace were repeatedly suppressed. Marso began to recall that this even led to a large-scale battle. In this battle, Ryan was in the spotlight, playing a leading role and successfully leading the fight. He was, of course, a skilled swordsman, but the victory was achieved thanks to enchanted items. At that time, the Imperial Army transported provisions and weapons using enchanted devices. This was only possible thanks to the abilities of sorcerers who bowed their heads to the Imperial family. The girl noted that this was quite ironic. While Marso was lost in thought, Petal began to get quite nervous. He asked if it would be too much to make the wizard the main character. Should he change it? The lady replied that she was fine with it, so he could continue working on the script. Petal was happy and thanked the young lady for that. Then Marso leaned over to the playwright and handed him her notes. She said she had a few ideas and asked the master to think about using them later. Petal was so impressed that he blushed when he read a few lines about drama, death, and unexpected plot twists. The man replied to the lady that he would do everything. After negotiations with Marso, Petal returned to the troupe and announced that it was time to start the play. The performance began. Ledro played the lead role of the sorcerer, and his partner was a young actress with long brown hair. The other actors also fit well into their roles and performed excellently. The stage was filled with different emotions and exciting action. Marso was not just impressed. She was enchanted by the play and could not take her eyes off it. After a couple of hours, the story ended. All the actors came out on stage and bowed to the only spectator, thanking her for her attention. Marso jumped up from her seat and, with tears in her eyes, began to applaud the actors. She shouted "Bravo" to them with enthusiasm. The girl thought to herself how wonderful it was to put your whole heart and soul into something. She was also glad that she had been able to record it all on camera. Then Ledro approached her and apologized to the lady. The boy asked if they could all watch the recording of the play together with the lady. Marso was a little surprised. She didn't mind, but wondered why they wanted to watch the recording. A little embarrassed, Ledro expressed the opinion of all the other actors. He said that they thought it was a good opportunity to watch their performance from the outside and draw conclusions. Marso agreed. When everyone had settled down, she turned on the recording. Petal was the most enthusiastic about the idea. He kept saying how excellent and wonderful it was. Watching the play, he was filled with inspiration. He didn't miss a chance to quickly jot down all the ideas that came to his mind. The other actors also began to lively discuss how they actually looked on screen and how their acting differed from that in rehearsals. Some noted for themselves where they needed to work on their movements or gestures in a particular scene. The troupe was thrilled to have the opportunity to watch and analyze their actions. The actors noted that it was very useful. Watching the enthusiastic actors, Marso thought that this might be the best way. It would allow them to enjoy the benefits of the enchanted devices and help them see for themselves that there was no curse. Then Petal, Ledro, and the rest of the troupe approached Marso. The playwright asked if they could also take a look at the next play. They understood that it was a very expensive device. If their request was not too presumptuous, would it be possible? They would understand if the lady refused. Marso was surprised. She knew very well that enchanted objects were indeed very expensive, and she understood why they were asking so timidly. Then the girl thought about it. She thought that she was not obliged to help them at all. Public opinion of her had never changed, despite her numerous acts of kindness. But still, remembering the feelings that the actor's performance had left in her heart, Marso decided to do it again. The girl quietly replied to Petal and the whole troupe that they could have as many as they wanted. The man asked the lady what she meant. Marso said that she could order another device. Therefore, they could use this device for rehearsals. Handing the camera to Petal, the girl also noted that she would keep this place open for them until 10 o'clock in the evening every day. The man and the actors were impressed by Lady Marso's generosity. Petal began to offer to pay at least a small fee for the device or give her something in return. Marso did not expect that this would change people's opinion of her, but she simply hoped that these people, who worked so hard every day, would begin to flourish. So the girl smiled kindly at the actors and said that they could repay her with their beautiful performance. Ledro did not expect this. The boy was enchanted by Lady Marso's expression and her warm smile. When the young mistress of Étoile passed him on her way out, he even looked away and blushed. Then the young man turned to Lady Marso and, kneeling before her, thanked her for today and asked how he could repay her. Marceau was a little puzzled by this behavior. The girl thought that as she had heard, Ledro's performance was unsurpassed. The lady touched the actor's shoulder and replied that his performance was beyond praise and his delivery of emotions was free and natural. And so he could repay her by continuing to work just as hard. Then Ledro took Marceau by the hand and, looking into her eyes, said that he would try his best and hoped that the lady would visit them often. Marceau did not understand what the young man was talking about and did not give it any importance. She simply agreed with him. Later, after visiting Ethel's estate, Ledro met his friends at a tavern. He told them that the rumors about Lady Marceau were completely untrue. One of his friends remarked that he didn't understand Ledro because he thought he had gone there for the money. So what did his words mean now? Another friend was surprised that such a popular actor as Ledro was short of money. His friend explained that Ledro had not had any work lately after he refused to become the lover of a noblewoman. The man also noted that this happened quite often with many leading male actors. These ladies simply wanted to keep handsome young men for themselves. Then the friend turned to Ledro and said that this meant that aristocrats usually felt nothing but disgust for him, and that he had never heard Ledro make the first move. Ledro smiled and explained that Lady Marceau was the first noblewoman who saw his acting first, rather than his appearance, that she looked at him for who he was, without any greed or lust in her eyes. The young man's friend remarked with a sly smile that Ledro was saying this as if he were ready to voluntarily become the lady's lover. The young man did not respond, but only smiled ambiguously. His companions understood Ledro's hint. They were impressed and asked if he was serious. Ledro replied that he saw no reason to refuse. He doubted that the girl would refuse either. Then the youngest of the companions said that he had heard a rumor that all the actors who worked for this noble family left with improved skills. He also asked Ledro if they had any special training, but Ledro smiled again and replied that it was a secret. Meanwhile, Marceau sat in her room drinking tea that Letty had just brought her. The girl was thinking that for the sake of confidentiality, she had made some changes to the contracts with the actors. If the talks about the recordings leaked out, the contracts would be terminated. After all, you never know how such information might be perceived by the public. But Marceau also noted that her theater project was going smoothly so far. They had already recorded 3 plays. The actors' skills were improving to perfection, and the draft of the desired script was almost ready. Giggling eerily, the girl rejoiced that she now had another reason not to leave the house. Watching her mistress, Letty noticed that the lady was in a good mood today. Then Marceau turned to the maid and asked if she had managed to find out anything about the matter. About Ryan? Letty replied that she had managed to find some useful information, but the lady did not ask for details. She simply thanked the maid for taking care of it. And she thought to herself that maybe she was just overreacting. Then Letty remembered something and took a letter out of her pocket. The maid said that Ledro had asked her to give this letter to the lady. After that, the maid took her leave and left the lady alone. Marceau was surprised and looked closely at the letter, which was sealed with a seal and decorated with a small sprig of flowers. The girl was curious to know what Ledro wanted to tell her in the letter. But at that moment, she had other things to do. So she did not open the letter, but put it aside. Suddenly, the wind rose and the lights flashed. And in Marceau's room, sitting in an armchair, Darcy appeared. The girl greeted the boy and noted that he was on time as always. Darcy replied that he greatly valued punctuality. Then Darcy looked at the girl's hand and asked what she was hiding in it. Without hiding anything, Marceau showed him and replied that it was a letter from one of the actors. She also said that she had lent them a recording device. The boy asked about the recording device. The young lady explained that this was the name she had given to the enchanted object he had made. Marceau also noted that everyone said his device was amazing. Not very pleased with this news, Darcy asked if this was really true. The boy muttered under his breath that it wasn't good if everyone found out about his abilities. The girl didn't hear what Darcy said, so she asked him to repeat it. But the boy replied that it didn't matter. Darcy then handed Marceau the new device she had ordered. He explained that if the device was connected to a recording device, the screen would become larger. The girl was delighted. She took the device in her hands and, looking at it, thought that she had simply described to Darcy what she wanted. Marceau couldn't believe that he could make these additional parts for the camera without even knowing how they worked. Then Marceau froze for a moment. A thought flashed through her mind. How could such a person not be mentioned in the original story? It seemed to her that the guy should be somehow connected to the main characters. The girl also speculated that maybe he had died, but Marceau pushed these thoughts away. Everything could be explained by the fact that Darcy was just a merchant, and therefore had no connection to the plot. Then the young lady turned to the boy. She informed him that she wanted to order another recording device from him. Since she was going to allow the actors to use the one she currently had, she wanted to purchase another one for the theater room. Darcy then put on a serious expression and asked Marcia sternly, "What for?" The girl did not understand his question. The guy asked again why she was going out of her way to help these people. Darcy said that they could take care of themselves, and that she should use all this for herself. Marceau was angry to hear the boy's opinion. She clearly stated that it was her choice whether to help these people or not. Darcy said that he just wanted her to not get involved in nonsense. Then Darcy looked up at her with his blue eyes and said with concern that she might get hurt again. Marceau froze and blushed at his words and expression. She decided that Darcy must be saying this because of what she had told him a few weeks ago in the theater room. Clutching her heart, Marceau dramatically replied that everything would be fine. Moreover, she didn't expect anything in return. In any case, it wasn't such a big deal for her. She just wanted them to perform well in the play. Suddenly, Darcy's hand touched the girl's fingers. Taking Marceau by the hand, the boy pointed out that she said she was not getting anything in return. But he had heard that the lady had taken Ledro as her lover. Hearing this, Marceau was shocked. She did not understand who she had taken in, where, and why. Darcy waved his hand and replied that he did not know. The stunned girl said that she didn't even see the actors, that she only came to the theater after their rehearsals were over. Seeing Marceau's sharp reaction and listening to her side of the story, Darcy was satisfied. After all, the rumors turned out to be untrue. He hurried to calm the girl down and said that if everything was as she said, then everything was fine. He had simply been misled. Marceau agreed with Darcy and said that it was just a misunderstanding. She noticed that she had blushed for some reason. Darcy stood silently for a few more minutes, looking at the embarrassed Marceau. She also looked at him. Then the guy asked if she needed anything else. He was getting ready, because he would be really busy very soon. And he didn't think he would be able to visit the lady for a while. Marceau said with an indifferent expression that everything was fine. She assumed that the boy's business was thriving. Darcy laughed and replied that it was something like that, but the business wasn't that big. Mars then formed her fingers into a rectangle and told the merchant that for her next project, she wanted a device that could capture and save this moment. Darcy asked if the lady wanted to be able to capture fragments of the recording and save them as images. The girl said yes. The guy pointed out that it was much easier than the previous project. Marceau wondered why. She also wondered how the guy could do everything she asked him to do. In that case, she would simply bury him under a pile of arcanium stones. Looking at the inspired girl, Darcy asked if she was curious when he would return. Marceau asked when he would return. The boy looked away sadly and replied that he did not know. This annoyed the girl greatly. Why did he make her ask if he wasn't coming back? Then Darcy said that they needed to go to the theater. Marceau looked at the boy in surprise. She didn't understand why he needed to go there. Darcy turned to her and explained with a broad smile that they were going to see a play. Just the two of them, just the two of us, Marceau thought as she took the recording device out of the theater. The girl thought that she had almost misunderstood Darcy's words. After all, after that sentence, he explained that he needed to check if the recording device was working properly. Marceau also thought about the boy's other words, that she wouldn't be able to see him for a while. Realizing this, the girl became sad. She gloomily took the camera and trudged out of the theater. Marceau thought about how little she knew about Darcy. She felt that his extraordinarily strong personality and the aura that surrounded him told her that he could not be an ordinary merchant. She also wondered if the reason he didn't want to be seen was related to his life as a wizard. The girl tried to push these thoughts away, as she had decided not to interfere in other people's business. Thinking that she just wanted everything to be as it was before, Marceau opened the door to the room where Darcy was waiting for her. When he saw the girl, Darcy smiled at her, and Marceau, thinking to herself how handsome he was, blushed. The boy approached Marceau with a book he had been leafing through while waiting for her and asked if she liked such novels. The girl replied that she did. Darcy said he was a little surprised that she liked romance, considering that she was sick of people. Marceau replied that she could still enjoy the stories. The girl explained that when she read about how complete strangers became so close that they couldn't live without each other, she began to feel much better. Darcy noted that if reading such stories made her feel better, it meant she had a vivid imagination. Marceau asked him why his tone had become so harsh when he said that. He replied that it made him charming. Sitting down on the sofa, Marceau asked the boy an unexpected question. She asked if he had ever been in love. Darcy lowered his eyes and replied sadly that he never had. He had never had the opportunity. Marceau found this answer strange. What did never had the opportunity to love mean? Then the girl asked where the guy lived. She bet that people would swarm around him if he took even one step on the street. Darcy said that he just didn't like being around people, and that's where they were alike. Putting the novel back on the shelf, the boy said that formally he was more like a slave. Marceau didn't understand what he meant. Darcy said that he spent most of his time in his room and rarely went outside. Then the boy came up close to Marceau, and looking into her eyes, said that he had been a little rude to her because she reminded him of his life, that she was just like that. Then Darcy took a step back and said that everything was fine now. With his head held high and a slight smile on his lips, the boy added that he was letting it all go now. Seeing the calm expression on Darcy's face as he said this, Marceau realized one important thing. He was going to leave. And he wasn't telling her because he didn't see the need to. He had simply created 2 enchanted devices for her. Turning back, Marceau realized that Darcy had revealed very little about himself. Realizing this, Marceau sadly thought that their next meeting would probably be their last. Darcy noticed Marceau's silence and asked her what she was thinking about so deeply. He suggested they start watching the play. The girl did as he said. An image appeared on the wall, and the performance began. Marceau was thrilled because the screen was so big and it was so much fun. She noted to herself that the story about the wizard was excellent, even when watched again. She also wondered if Darcy liked the story. She glanced at the boy, who was watching the recording calmly, without any obvious emotion. He noticed that Marceau was looking at him and asked what was wrong. The girl replied that he seemed so focused, which was not like him. Darcy noted that she must have put a lot of effort into recording it all. Then the boy muttered that spells were as complicated as sword fights. That's why he preferred more concise and swift battles. Marceau pointed out that he spoke as if he had experience in this. Darcy replied that she had too much imagination. The girl wondered if the reason why this would be Darcy's last visit could be related to something like a battle. A terrible thought flashed through Marceau's mind. Could this be the cause of his death? The girl was overcome with horror. She didn't want Darcy to die. In a panic, she began to wonder if there was anything she could say to help him. But her knowledge of the plot of the novel would be of no use to him. She urgently needed to come up with something that could protect Darcy. For example, a powerful weapon that would save his life. And then a clear image of such a weapon appeared in Marceau's mind. A pistol. At that moment, the girl turned to Darcy and asked if he could create something like that. After listening to the lady's new request, the boy said that it was time for him to go. Marceau asked if he liked the play. Darcy replied that it wasn't bad, but he found the idea of the new device she had come up with interesting. It was similar to a portable cannon. The young man said he thought he could create it using a little arcanum. Hearing this, Marceau was delighted. As he was leaving the room, Darcy suddenly stopped, and looking at the girl said that she should read a letter. Marceau asked, confused. What letter? The boy reminded her of the letter the actor had sent her. He said he had a feeling about it and wanted her to read it aloud. He was very curious and wanted to hear it. Darcy offered the girl that if she read the letter to him, he would make a recording device for her for free. Marceau thanked him but declined the offer, reminding him that she had plenty of money to spend. Then Darcy said that he had just realized that the guy had sent the letter to her personally. Marceau looked at him with surprised lilac eyes and asked what he was talking about. She had already felt this feeling last time, when it seemed to her that Darcy was jealous. Thinking about it, the girl swallowed and pulled herself together. She got up from the bed and asked Darcy in a firm voice not to say that again. People might think that she liked him or something like that. The boy was surprised and replied that he was sorry she took it that way. Marceau pointed out that other people might take it that way. Then Darcy asked Marceau if that was what she wanted. The girl was confused. She didn't understand what he meant. Darcy pretended to be a cool guy and said that he knew she liked him. Marceau blushed and began to deny it and shout, asking how he could possibly know that. The boy laughed and replied that only a fool would not understand something so obvious. that the girl's gaze spoke for itself. Calming down a little, Darcy asked Marceau again if she wanted him to be interested in her. But as soon as he leaned in to kiss her, Marceau pushed him away and said she didn't want to. Surprised, Darcy asked why. The girl said she found it hard to believe that he could be monogamous. The boy said he couldn't disagree with that. For him, love was not the most pleasant thing. Marceau caught him out and reminded him that he had told her he had never been in love. Darcy replied that he had seen many people who were in love, that it was always the same thing. They held hands, hugged, and kissed each other constantly, paying no attention to anyone else. Then Darcy smiled slyly at Marceau and said that if necessary, he could do it. But he wasn't sure if it would be true love. After thinking for a moment, the boy added that after Marceau's words, he began to feel challenged. The girl didn't understand what he meant. Then Darcy took Marceau by the hand, pulled her closer, and hugged her around the waist. Looking into the girl's eyes, he said that if he wanted something, he would always get it. Then the boy asked the confused Marceau again if she wanted him to love her. Marceau was stunned by such pressure, but she understood perfectly well that there was no point in harboring false hopes, because the answer was already clear. The girl lowered her eyes and wanted to say something, but Darcy interrupted her and told her to forget it, that there was no need to force herself to answer the question. Letting go of Marceau's hand, the boy added that they would see each other in 2 weeks. As he walked away, Darcy waved goodbye. Marceau smiled and said that he always did what he wanted, but when Darcy disappeared, Marceau's expression changed to one of concern. She kept thinking about why he didn't appear in the original story. Could it really be because the boy had died? Marceau muttered the word wizard under her breath. She began to recall that there was something suspicious and unusual in the original story. Emperor Kaisi constantly took part in battles with sorcerers. He was admired for bravely going into battle regardless of the danger. Ryan, on the other hand, only joined the army when serious unrest arose. Thinking about this, Marceau realized that the timing didn't add up. Ryan did not take part in battles when the Emperor did. It was unlikely that Ryan lacked skills. But the Emperor was not the type to care for and protect his son. Rather, it seemed that they were avoiding fighting together. Marceau understood that it might not be related, but it could also be a clue. Sighing heavily, the girl noted that in the end, she had grown attached to Darcy. But it wasn't that she wanted or craved anything more. She just wanted everything to be okay. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Kais announced that he was going on a 2-week hunt for sorcerers. He therefore ordered Prince Ryan to stay behind and keep watch over the palace. Kneeling before the Emperor, the young man accepted His Majesty's order and replied that everything would be done. Ryan wondered how much longer he would have to just watch. The Emperor had never given him the opportunity to get involved in the country's problems. Then the Emperor ordered the prince to raise his head and said that when he had sorted everything out, he would give Ryan the castle of Seiren. He added that the coronation ceremony would take place in the near future. The young man was shocked to hear that his father wanted to entrust him with the castle of Seiren. After all, everyone avoided the subject and only whispered about it in hushed tones. Seiren was a neglected and old castle with heavy security. It was a place where Emperor Kais imprisoned sorcerers and tortured them. Ryan couldn't understand why the Emperor was going to entrust such a place to him. The boy speculated that perhaps the business that had to be done there was finally coming to an end. But that didn't matter now. Since the Emperor had mentioned the coronation ceremony, Ryan couldn't pass up his chance. The prince stood up straight, and with a smile, thanked His Majesty for the trust he had placed in him. Then the Emperor asked how things were going with his daughter Etuela. He was told that she had shut herself away in her estate. His Majesty noted that this family owned 2 arcanum mines. Therefore, if the prince married the girl, they would be able to dominate the arcanum market. Prince Ryan clearly did not like the Emperor's words. He shouted that they already had enough of these stones. But the Emperor calmly replied that they needed more. Ryan began to say that there must be some other way, but the Emperor slammed his fist on the throne. The man said in a threatening voice that he believed that with common sense, the boy would do what was necessary for the Empire and for their family. Ryan was in despair. But the Emperor looked menacingly at his son and firmly ordered the prince to arrange an engagement with Lady Etual. Emperor Kais was a ruthless man, but he had a weakness for his mistress Nadgermain. He had secretly brought the silver-haired woman to the palace after the Empress died. At that time, peace reigned in the palace, and the two were happy. Happiness lasted until the emperor's love, Nagermain, also died. Then cruel punishments and senseless mass murders became more frequent. Heartbroken, Emperor Kaisa seemed to have gone mad. He completely lost his mind. Walking down the palace corridor after his audience with the emperor, Ryan thought that he could not marry Marceau, not for Leswin's sake. The young man understood that he had 2 weeks and 2 options. He had to convince the emperor of the advantages of his marriage to Leswin, or force his majesty to believe in the fatal flaws of Marceau Etual. Ryan also knew that there were rumors that the girl had a lover, so he decided to use this topic, and for this, he would have to use a spy whom he had sent to the Etual estate in advance. But suddenly Ryan remembered Lady Marceau's last words, that she hoped he was suffering as much as she was. The young man decided that this was complete nonsense, because people do not change so easily. So the prince decided that he would take care of the villain standing between him and Leswan, all for the sake of their happiness, only theirs. Meanwhile, the villainess sat in her mansion and carefree enjoyed cakes. A whole line of chefs from different pastry shops in the city lined up to offer Mars their cake designs. The girl was delighted. For her, it was pure happiness. When one of the chefs presented the lady with his signature dessert from his shop, Liberté, the other chef standing behind him was stunned. Another chef standing behind him was stunned when he saw his colleague's dessert. He gasped and exclaimed that this tiramisu was of such high quality that even a chef like him would not be worthy of tasting it. But Marceau was generous and gladly treated the chef to this incredible and exquisite dessert. The man beamed with happiness. The girl thought to herself that if the line at the pastry shop was too long, she could just hire a personal pastry chef. She also thought about how tired she was of constantly worrying about what was going on. So she would just enjoy the moment, no matter how fleeting it was. Mars then began to ponder which of the cakes presented to her she would try first. Suddenly, a worried Letty ran into the room and told the lady that Lady Leswan had arrived at the estate. Marceau was shocked. The girl asked the maid to tell Leswan to go away. But Letty hesitated and said that the lady had already entered. At that moment, Lady Leswan's scream echoed throughout the mansion as she burst in with a pile of gifts, shouting that she wanted to talk to Marceau. Marceau had no choice but to receive Leswan. Letty set the table in the conservatory and served tea. The maid was worried about her mistress because Marceau looked depressed. The joy that the girl had radiated just a few minutes ago had disappeared without a trace. Finally, Marceau broke the heavy silence that hung in the conservatory. She turned to Lady Leswan and asked if she remembered what she had been saying to His Highness all this time. Marceau also asked what was going on with Commander Kaisen. Leswan was embarrassed and lowered her eyes. Looking at the confused Lejeune, Marceau pointed out that she was not saying that the lady had done anything wrong. Then the girl placed a yellow box on the table in front of Lejeune and rose from her seat. But Marceau remarked that since their views on friendship seemed to differ, it would be better if they ended things there. With that, Lady Etoile got ready to leave. Leswang jumped up and timidly asked Marceau a question. Leswang also grabbed the girl firmly by the hand and asked what would happen if she changed too. Marceau was stunned. Leswan, with tears in her eyes, continued to ask if their relationship would change in that case. Lady Etoile was pained to see Leswan suffering, but she gritted her teeth and released her hand. Marceau replied, "No." With a stern and angry expression on her face, Marceau coldly said that she had waited too long. Then Lady Etoile thanked Lady Leswan for her memories and left, leaving her crying friend in the greenhouse. As she left the conservatory, Marceau kept thinking that she should not entertain herself with vain hopes, believing that this time everything would be different. And the girl had no need to return to what caused her pain. Marceau stopped and lay down on one of the couches in a room on the other side of the conservatory. She looked at the rays of light streaming through the glass ceiling and said that she was very tired. The girl wondered if she would feel better if she just cried like Lejeune did. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Marceau thought it must be Letty and asked the maid through the door what was going on, but there was no answer. Getting up, the girl wondered why Letty was silent. Marceau approached the door. She opened it abruptly and shouted angrily, asking what else the devils had brought. To her greenhouse, no less? The young lady spoke more quietly when she realized that it was clearly not Letty standing at the door. Looking up, Marceau saw that it was Ledro standing in front of the door, holding a small box in his hands. She was very surprised. The boy just looked sheepishly at the young mistress. Marceau didn't understand why Ledro had appeared here so suddenly. Moreover, she was not in the mood to talk to anyone. The girl felt a little uneasy. She asked the boy what had brought him here. Ledro replied that he had something for the lady. The boy opened a box containing an embroidered handkerchief. He explained that Lady Marceau had done so much for them that he and all the members of the troupe had prepared a small gift for her to express their gratitude. Ledro thanked Lady Etchel on behalf of the entire troupe for allowing them to use the enchanted device. Marceau was pleasantly surprised. She asked again if it was really a gift from the entire cast.